So, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the webinar entitled Enlighten Your Team with Coaching. Now, whether you're a professional coach, as I know some of you are, at least one, or whether you're someone who does this as part of your managerial job, or whether you just want to learn about it and get into it, this webinar is for you. So let me tell you a little bit about what I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to start off and give you a bit of an introduction about me. Some of you may already know me, some of you won't. So I'm going to give you a bit of my background and how I got to be doing this kind of stuff. Then I'm going to talk to you and I guess interact with you around what do we mean by coaching? Because there's a lot of versions of what coaching actually is. And I want us to make sure we're on the same page before we go into it. Then what I'm going to do is talk about the case for and against coaching, which may sound a little bit interesting because this session is all about coaching. But coaching is a fantastic tool, a powerful tool, but it's not always the right tool for the job. So we're going to explore where it is and where it isn't. And then I'm going to talk to you about how to truly coach someone, how to fully and utterly engage with them in the way that I believe a coach should. And at the end, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I can help you further along your own coaching journey. Okay, a little bit about me. So I'm a published author. I wrote a book called Engage, which is available on Amazon. And basically, I take from it these webinars. So my main role is a executive coach. I've got a background as a chartered occupational psychologist. I'm also a public speaker and facilitator. That's where I spend most of my time actually facilitating groups and coaching individuals. If this means anything to you, I'm a certified NLP, that's neuro-linguistic programming trainer. I'm also a master coach. And I also did 3 years as a stint as a dating coach. Now, what do all of these things have in common? It's all about lenses through which to look at people. So I've actually spent the majority of my time in organizations, and I've coached over 1,000 managers and leaders across both the public sector and the private sector. And I've done that across 24 different countries. So I have both had a lot of coaching, and I've had some fantastic coaches, and I've done a lot of coaching. So I'm absolutely a fan of coaching and the process of coaching. So that's what I want to share with you tonight. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how I roll. So I like to make it interactive. I hate those webinars where they just go blah, 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 and basically you just sit back and pin your ears back. So tonight, I'm going to be asking you questions. I'm going to want you to respond to me, because if you don't, it's going to be a little bit one-directional, and I'm going to get bored of hearing my own voice. So I'm going to throw out questions. I want you to come straight back with some answers straight into the chat box. I'm also going to put up a couple of polls. So I'm going to be giving you some questions where I've already pre-populated the answers. I'm going to get you to vote on them. And also I'll be getting you to do a little bit of interaction with me. So stick with the process, go through it. A lot of the times when I do this kind of thing, people go, yeah, I know this, or yeah, I've heard this before. But believe me, it's all about the practice. So I'm going to get you to use your brain tonight and actually think about stuff as we go. Okay. We do have a lot to get through in the next hour. So whatever you're doing, stay with me. If you're on another screen at the moment, multitasking, please listen to me. Give me your full attention, because it is going to be a very interactive session. I know it's always tempting to answer Facebook or to Google Browse or whatever, but you've signed up for this for a reason. All right. So here's a little bit about me. This is a bit of an embarrassing picture, actually. This is me when I was 19 years old. I know I look about 12, but I started off as a painfully shy young man and child. In fact, right up until my early 20s, if somebody rang the phone, I wouldn't answer the phone. So this problem kind of persisted all the way into my 20s. And then when I finally started to come out of my shell and I started to work with people, I found I was actually all about trying to control my environment. I just wanted to lock things down and be in charge and tell people what to do, because that made my life less stressful. But in fact, I ended up becoming a micromanager, and it started to turn people off, and they didn't want to work with me. So as a process, I went on a bit of a journey. It ended up being a 20-year process of exploration. And I really wanted to understand what makes other people tick. What makes them do the things they do? And what actually makes people more interesting, more influential, and helps them to actually connect with people? So I ended up becoming outplacement consultant, was one of my first jobs, helping people to get jobs. Then I became a chartered occupational psychologist, then an NLP trainer, then an executive coach. And I even did, as I said, 3 years as a dating coach. And my biggest takeaway in all of that time is actually that interpersonal skills and soft skills of leadership can be learned. No matter what your background, they can be learned and they can be systemized and taught. So today, I guess you could say I have achieved what I wanted to achieve. I love doing presentations. I love going out there. I love connecting with people. I love helping people to change. And I actually get paid to help people, which is absolutely fantastic. And that led me to design my framework for helping people, which is the Engage model. Now, the Engage model is a 6-stage framework in which I have put together and synthesized 20 years of my knowledge, my experiences across all those different genres into one framework. So I'm going to quickly go through it just so you have a sense, because this particular webinar relates to one aspect only. So a quick whistle-stop tour of the Engage model. The first stage is all about how to make a great first impression. And that's before you even say anything. So it's your posture, your eye contact, the way you use your expression, your smile, physiology, the whole piece, how you modulate your voice, but not what you say. Then, of course, you go on and you need to connect with people. So once you've made that great impression, then it's all about how do you go from small talk to big talk? How do you introduce yourself to strangers? How do you deepen that rapport? And then how do you wind up in a way that leaves people feeling good and valued, not dumped? So once you can make a great impression and start connecting with people, then of course you can start to influence them, which I call the guide section. Now, this is where people want to jump in first, but the first 2 stages are actually really important. But guide is all about how do you use your voice, your words, your linguistics, and your physiology all together for the maximum amount of presence and influential power. Now, if you were to go around just influencing people for your own benefit, you're probably not going to get too many wins for over a long time. So the next stage is acknowledge. This is all about empathy and how to really understand other people. Now, if you can do all of those 4 things, you're going to start getting into longer and deeper interactions, both socially and with business. And so this is where you need to go the distance. So Glow is all about how to never run out of things to say. It's how to use humor. It's how to improvise, and it's how to tell engaging stories. And once you can do all of those 5 things, then you are ready to stop being the expert and start being the leader of people. And this is the stage we're going to have a touch into today, which is the Enlighten stage, how to give feedback, how to coach, and how to develop. All right, so that's a little bit of the Engage model. I help people from all different walks of life, but I do tend to find that people who are technically brilliant, and that may be from any kind of background, but who have a real technical knowledge and know-how, tend to benefit from my services. I'm going to start off by dispelling a couple of myths. Typically, people that work with me often come in with a little bit of baggage, and there's a few myths that I want to just get out of the way straight away. First of all, I often hear people say, yeah, I'm not really a people person. Well, I've got some news for you. You're part of the human race. So as a consequence, we are all pack animals. You must have just forgotten how to do it. So today we're going to get straight past that. We're going to get into some practical applications. The second one I hear is, I don't need to be a people person to succeed. I particularly hear this in technical professions, but you do, because you need other people in order to do things. In this day and age, you can't work in isolation, and everything you do is being judged. Everything you say and everything you don't say is being judged, because everything we do is communication, and you can't not communicate. Everything you do is communication, so you better start focusing on it. And finally, people say, I'm too set in my ways to learn new things. Well, that's just nonsense, because we're all human beings, and human beings are the most adaptable species on the planet. So if I was to tell you that your life depended on learning how to coach, I bet you'd be pretty damn good at it. So we can all learn, we can all develop, we can all change. And everything we're going to discuss tonight is about becoming a more effective leader and a more effective communicator. So let's get straight into it, and let's talk a little bit about what do we mean by coaching. Now, this is a very interesting question because there's lots of different types of coaches. So I'm going to pop up a poll. So keep your eyes on the screen, and what you should see is a question that pops up. And you've got basically one question, which is, what is the purpose of a coach? And then you have 5 options: to espouse wisdoms, to tell people how to do things better, to ask questions, to impart knowledge, or to apply his or her technical expertise. I'd like you to vote on that. I'd like to see what you think the purpose of a coach is. The results coming in, I'm going to quote the statistics. 25% people said to espouse wisdoms, and 75% of people said to ask questions, which interestingly is my take on it. So what I must point out is tonight we're going to be talking about my take on coaching. And that might not necessarily be your definition of coaching, but there are lots of different types of coaching. There is, in fact, before we do that, before I talk to you about my version of coaching, I just want to ask a question to you as a group. What is the difference? Because this is something, a distinction which often gets confused. What is the difference between a coach and a mentor? Mentor impart experience and knowledge. Absolutely, Rachel. A mentor shows the way, and a coach empowers the client to find their own way. Spoken like a true coach there, Stacey. Okay, I'm going to work with that. If you're still going and typing away, fire away, keep doing it. That's all good. Absolutely. You're very much in the same mindset as me. A mentor, whilst there's no exact definition of this, and people will always differ. A mentor is someone who's normally more senior, has wisdom in that particular field, and therefore has been there, done it, bought the t-shirt, and they can navigate you or help to navigate you through, I guess, the treacherous path. I have a mentor, I have a business mentor, and whilst he does a similar thing to me, he does it at a much higher level in terms of business development. So I look to him for his wisdoms. But a coach is all about getting people to think. So when I talk about the purpose of a coach, which we've already discussed, it's to use questions to open up a person's mind. It's not just about, I guess, having wisdom. Is about being able to activate that wisdom in other people. So I've got another polling question for you, which again, I'm kind of interested in your answers. So I'm going to launch the poll. Just pop your answer in there. And the question is, does a coach need to be a subject matter expert, I guess, in the topic of what they're coaching? Yes or no? No. So what I'm seeing here is 100% in favor of no, which is good, because otherwise we would have had a problem. So a coach does not need to be an expert. Can a coach be an expert? Of course they can. I often coach people, which I've got a fair degree of experience in, but there's a double-edged sword to this, because whilst you can sometimes use carefully crafted questions to help influence them to think about certain things, it can often be a trap, and you end up imposing your own view of the world, albeit indirectly. So actually sometimes not being an expert in the topic is very, very helpful. And of course, if it's a really personal issue, you're never going to be an expert in that person's life. So actually, sometimes not being an expert at all is really, really good. Okay, so the next question is, to coach or not? Now, people don't normally walk up to you and say, hey, will you coach me, please? Actually, they kind of do to me, but that's because that's what I do for a living. But most people don't get asked that question. No one kind of walks up and asks to be coached. What they do walk up and do is they will walk up and present you with a problem, or they will ask you a question. And then it's your choice. It's your choice to actually go, okay, is now the most appropriate time to coach? So what I want you to think about is, I want you to think about when would be the most appropriate moments to coach? So, what would be the perfect circumstances? And in fact, I'm going to get you to type this into the chat box. What would be the perfect circumstances for someone to be, I guess, fit for coaching? What would they need to have? A frustration that's hurting them. Yep, I like that. That's good. Thank you, Stacey. Cool. I'm going to draw you something. So this is a handy little tool which I call the skill wheel matrix, and I learned this probably about a decade ago, and I found it immensely useful both in coaching clients and also in coaching the people that work for me. So this is basically how it works. I'll try and keep it relatively simple. On the vertical axis, you have skill. Now, what does that mean? It means basically in relation to the topic they're being coached on, how talented are they? How much knowledge have they got? How much experience have they got? So there's either not a lot, it's brand new to them, or they're just not very good at it, or very good. We got to keep it nice in nice boxes. And then on the other axis, you have will. Now, this kind of relates to what Stacey was talking about, and that is the desire to change. It's basically the will to be coached and to do this thing that we're talking about. Now, it's interesting to look at both because it will determine where people fall on this grid, will determine the style which you should adopt. So I'm going to throw it out there. I'm going to say, I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. Which quadrant, so we're talking bottom left, top right, bottom right, keep it nice and simple like that. Which quadrant do you think is most receptive to the non-directive coaching style, which we've been talking about, which is asking questions? Is it going to be high skill, low will, high will, high skill, high will, low will, or low skill, low will? That's the question. Bottom right. Okay, we got some varying answers, bottom right. Interesting. All right, so here's my take. This is the Duncan's top tip. I'm not saying this is gospel, but this is the way I look at the world. So I'm going to just change up colors here. If someone is in the bottom right-hand corner in here, typically I would say there's one of two reasons. If they don't want to do it and they can't do it, whatever it is you're talking about in terms of coaching, then they're either in the wrong job and they shouldn't be in that job. So it's about transition. How can you find that person a better role? Or it may have to go down the performance management route. But they're not necessarily going to be the perfect candidate for non-directive coaching because there might be a little bit of direction that needs to be given here. If you have someone who is the high will but low skill, so in this sort of bottom right-hand box, this to me means baby steps. It means someone's chomping at the bit to do it, but they don't know how to do it. So you've got to give them one little segment at a time and sort of nurture them along. So make sure that they don't fail and that they keep building up their competence in steps. Then you've got the high skill, low will. So they know how to do it, they're good at it, but they just don't want to do it. So for me, that's completely and utterly a motivational chat. That's about unlocking what is it that's holding them back. This is completely a mindset thing. What is it they need in order to reconnect with the skill and the talent which you already know they've got? Which leaves us with the top right-hand box. And you might be going, well, hang on, these guys are like high skill and high will. Why the hell would they need coaching? Non-directive coaching works best when someone is facing a challenge that they don't know how to deal with, but they've also got resources to draw on. So if they've had previous experiences or they're aware of other people that do things, that basically they need to have some level of knowledge in order for this to work. And they have to want to change, as we've talked about already. give you an example. If I was laying it on, and let's hope this never happens, but let's imagine I was laying on an operating table, and for some reason I came slightly conscious and I could hear the senior surgeon talking to the junior brain surgeon. So where do you think you need to cut first? I'll tell you what, I'd be off that table quicker than you say crackerjack. So you need to have a little bit of knowledge, and you need to have a little bit of will in order for this to work. So going now, we know when coaching, this style of coaching is best. We're going to talk about a very simple model. This isn't my model, I wish it was, but it is fantastic, and it's called the GROW model, and John Whitmore created this. And if you don't know anything about him, look him up. He's a genius. Now, what do I like about the GROW model? This is probably one of the most powerful 4-step models that I've ever come across when it comes to coaching. I, as a psychologist and NLP practitioner and executive coach and blah, 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 I've been on lots of training courses. I've got lots of qualifications, and I've been taught lots and lots and lots of different ways of coaching people, some of which are, they really are like rocket science. It doesn't have to be. And this model is very, very, very simple. And when it's done well, it's very, very powerful. And it's going to work 9 times out of 10 if you do it right. So let's get into it and talk about how to do it. So in order to make this a little bit more representative of a coaching session, I'm going to ask you questions. So I'm going to try and coach you through the coaching model. Now, what I will do, though, is I will tell you the purpose of each of the steps, because this is where I often find that the teaching of this model falls down, is that people are not really aware what each stage is about, and each stage has a very specific function and purpose. So we're going to start off, and we're going to have a high-level overview of the model. Firstly, we have the goal. This is, what are we here for? What are we talking about? What's the problem you want to achieve? What do you want to get out of this session? All of those good things. Once we understand what we're trying to get to, then we, as the coach, we help that person explore their reality. In other words, what's going on for them right now? What's happening? What's holding them back? All of these good things. This is probably, to me, this is the most important stage of the coaching model. Because if you don't nut this bit right, if you don't loosen someone's model of the world here, anything that comes afterwards is not going to be very useful. So I'm going to come back to this a little bit later. Now, whilst this is a fairly linear model, it's not exactly, because often what will happen is as you start exploring reality, you'll find out new information which will get you to go back and kind of, calibrate it against the goal. And you'll go, hang on a minute, that doesn't quite fit with what you said you wanted to achieve. So this can go a little bit in cycles. These 2 stages in particular can go in cycles. Now, once you have gone through the reality stage, then you can get into options. And options, of course, is all about how to get someone to think differently about the situation and come up with options which were different to the ones they already had. Now, my, rule of thumb on this is to come up with at least 3 options, because 1 option is a directive, 2 is a dilemma, but 3 is a choice. So you can come up with as many as you want, but don't just come up with 1, because that's probably not a fully explored coaching session. So that's my bit of advice there. And then finally, is kind of like the project manager stage, the what next. This is all of the, what are you going to do? What's the first thing you're going to do? What does it look like? What's the time involved? What resources are involved? What people are involved? What are you going to do first? When are you going to come back to me? These are all the sort of the very, process-driven stages. So I've given you a little bit of an inkling there about what kind of goes into each step, but this is where I want to get a bit more interactive, and I want you to do some work. I'm going to get you to tell me what sort of questions go in each model. Now, you might want to write these down, or if you listen back to the webinar, you're going to be able to hear these back again, but I would suggest that you scribble these down, because this is where the gold is. So let's start off with a nice simple beginning, and don't overlook the obvious questions. What kind of questions could we ask in relation to the goal stage? What do you want, and why do you want it? Absolutely. That's a very good question. What do you see yourself doing? What's your ideal lifestyle in 5 years? So yeah, some of these questions here, like what's your ideal lifestyle in 5 years, depending on the context, that might be right. If that's around life transition or career transition, that's absolutely perfect. What do you see yourself doing? Yep, that's a good question as well. So these are, what do you want to get out of it? What does good look like? What does success look like? What are you trying to achieve? All of these types of things. What's holding you back? I might hold that one back, Stacey, until the next round. I think that will come in nicely in reality. So let's imagine you now have a very crystallized idea of what someone wants to achieve, but that's it. So now we're going to go into the reality stage. What's your biggest problem right now? Yep, I like that one, Stacey. That's good. We're going to go into the reality stage. So what I want you to do is write down now what kinds of questions would help you understand what's going on for that person. Now, this is why I find reality is the most important stage, because most times when it comes to coaching and getting value out of a coach, they don't magically make anything happen. But what they do is they untangle the mess in your mind. They actually get you to stop thinking the same way that you've been thinking about the problem, and they open up your world. So if you can change someone's beliefs, even the belief that they can't do something, then suddenly you're now ready to talk about options. But if you go through the reality stage and you haven't changed the way the person thinks about the problem or the situation, doesn't matter what you do after that, it's not going to work. All right, so we've got some questions. So, how do you think you're tracking? Good, I like that one. Are you where you want to be right now? Good, that gives a sense of where that person is. What would change about, I think that might be, what would you change about things right now? Yep, that's good. All right, so some extra questions. All of those are good. What would you change? Cool, thanks for the correction. All right, so a couple of questions that it would be good to ask. So, what's going on? What have you tried? What haven't you tried? What's stopping you? What do you believe is possible? What do you believe is impossible? Now, often I find with this question, it often brings up a bit of a common answer. You say, so what have you tried? And someone, if they're feeling a little bit, I guess, beaten by the situation, they'll go, oh, I've tried everything. Now, I love this question or this answer because I never just let it go. I never just let it slide. I played a bit of devil's advocate. I say, everything? You've tried everything? And they go, yeah, I've tried everything. I go, all right, well, we got a bit of a time here. So let's list out all these things that you've tried. And you know what? Virtually no one has ever tried more than the three things. And they might go, well, I've tried three things. I go, three things. Three things isn't, well, let me ask you, is three things every possible combination of factors and ways forward in the world? And of course, they have to say no. Okay, so do you think there actually might be something that you haven't tried yet that could actually help you get a breakthrough in this? And this is what we're looking for. We're looking to help people to change the way they look at the problem. Because if you move into options and people still think it's impossible, it ain't going to change. So that's my top tip around the reality. Challenge the reality. Don't just find out what it is and verify it. Good. Glad you're loving it, Stacey. Okay, so now we're going to get into options, and this is another one of my, I guess, my personal bugbears. When I listen to people coach, or I hear people coach, or I even been coached myself, if they only ask the superficial, obvious questions, I don't get a lot out of the process, and I don't think other people do. So I'm going to ask you now. Now I've said that, of course, you're going to be thinking, oh no, well maybe my questions are just the obvious ones. I'm going to challenge you to come up with some questions in the option stage. And I do want you to cover the obvious ones. And then we're going to see if you can come up with the extra spicy ones. Because you have to do the obvious ones first. But if you only do those, you're not going to be a very effective coach. So in the chat box for the options section, remember the options is all about finding out multiple ways forward, different ways of trying things. I want you to write in the chat box what you could ask as an option question. All right. So, what resources do you have at your disposal? That's a good question, Stacey. That could also be part of the reality stage, or it could be actually part of the what next stage. But I like it. How would you approach this? How would you like to approach this? Yep, that's good. What do you think is the best way to approach this? Yep, that's good. So, what we've got here is we have some really good, I would call these tier one questions. These are the questions you have to ask first. Because if you ask the big gun questions first, people will get a bit freaked out. But if you don't ask these questions, okay, we've got another one here. Which of these options do you like the most and why? So, Stacey, again, I would park this one to the what next stage once you're into evaluation mode. But that's a brilliant question. So, don't get me wrong, that's fantastic. All right. So, remember the reality stage is to shake their reality and to get them to think differently. The option stage is to get people to break out of what I call the problem box. Everyone is stuck in the problem box. When you're in the problem box and you have a problem, all you can see is the problem. It's like it's all around you. You can't see your way out of it, and you feel helpless and useless and like the world's against you. That's not a very useful place to come up with options. So what you need to do is you need to ask questions that get people to think outside of the box, even if it's way outside of the box, because then you can come back in. But if you're trapped inside the problem box, you're not going to be able to think very clearly and very creatively. So there's a couple of questions which I'm going to suggest that you ask. These aren't by any means an exhaustive list, but these are some of my favorite questions. Okay. First question is, if you were CEO or insert a powerful figure of your choice, king, chief of, president, prime minister, whoever, for the day, what would you do? So the whole idea behind this question is you're trying to give them someone with almighty power who has no boundaries. I know we all have boundaries and all of these people have boundaries. You could say if you had a magic wand for a day. But what you want to do is you want to get people to think way outside the boundaries of the problem. That's question number one. Question number two, if you had all the resources in the world, all the time, all the money, access to people, what would you do? Same thing. You want to get them to think outside of the problem. Now here, the last one is my favorite every question. But before I get to the last one, there's actually another one I'm going to slip in there. It's not on the slide, but this is, do you know anyone, says there's a two-part question. First part's closed. Do you know anyone who is good at what you want to be good at? So this is where you're getting them to think of a role model. It could be someone they work with, could be someone they know, could be a friend, a peer, a colleague, could be someone unrelated to them, but they know they're good at it. And if they say yes, what is it that they do that's different to you? That's the key. What is it that they do that's different to you? So that's 4 questions, 3 questions so far. I'm going to give you my favorite all-time question. This one, when someone asked me this about 20 years ago, it blew me away, and I've remembered it ever since. Now, this question, like with all of them, you're going to need to set it up. I'll talk to you about that one, but here's the question. If you could invite any 3 people into the room, dead or alive, real or fictitious, who would they be? So that's part 1 of the question. Then you wait for the answer and you get them to tell you. Now, it doesn't matter who they say. It doesn't matter if they say Mickey Mouse, Adolf Hitler, and what is it, SpongeBob SquarePants. Doesn't matter. That's not for you to judge. What you then do is you say, okay, what would SpongeBob SquarePants do in this situation? The fact of the matter is you're getting them to think through a different frame of reference. So let's do a little experiment. I want you to type something into the chat box and it's just going to be yes or no. But work with me on this. I'm going to do like the pre-seed version of this question. You don't have to share the answer to the first part of the question, but you have to think about it. So the question, the first part is, think about a problem or a challenge that you have in your own life right now. What's a challenge, whether it's work or personal, doesn't matter. Think about a challenge that you have in your own life right now. Now, this is the part I just want you to answer with a yes or no. If you were to think through the eyes of your, if you were now could imagine your mother coming into the room, whether she's with us or she's passed on, doesn't matter, but imagine you could invite your mother into the room and you could say to her, Mum, what would you do about this? The question I want you to answer is, would she come up with exactly the same idea as you? It doesn't have to be a good one. I just need to know whether it's the same idea, yes or no. Probably not. And a little bit of a smile from Rachel. Doesn't matter what your mum thinks or whether or not she's the best person to ask. I just want you to get into the mindset of, if you're going to coach someone, you can have to get them to think really laterally. Now, each of these three people you invite into the room actually ends up saying something different. And here's the weird thing. It all comes out of your own head. So there you go. There you go. So my little bit of a caveat around these questions is you have to set them up. If you're going to ask these big questions, these turbocharged questions, you can't just go, okay, straight from reality. So what's been happening? What have you tried? All right, so imagine you can invite any three people into the room. Honestly, if you do that, they're going to look at you like you're a weirdo and they're probably not going to take you seriously. So you got to set it up. Ask the normal questions first, then say, all right, let's get a little bit creative. Let's see if we can do something a bit differently. I want you to get you to think a little bit more laterally here, then ask the questions. Okay, so that's that. I'm going to go back to the final stage of the model, the what next stage. So I'm going to throw this over to you again. This is all about the next steps. It's the planning stage, it's the execution stage. So what sort of questions would you need to ask here to make sure your coachee doesn't just walk away from the session and do diddly squat? Write that in the chat box now for me, please. Okay, got something coming through. What are the deliverables from you before our next meeting? I love that one, Stacey. I'm going to talk about that next. Okay, what could be a win for you by our next meeting? That's good. I like that. What's reasonable to have done before we catch up next? Good. What's reasonable to expect? Good. All good things. Okay, so a couple of extra things to consider is, what resources do you need? You ask these questions. What resources do you need? Whose experiences or skills do you need to draw on? Whose support do you need? What's the time scale? What are the milestones? When you're going to have this ready for us to meet again and have a look at? There's probably a heap more, but they're the kind of the core ones. It's all about action steps. Now, closely aligned to this is the importance of tasking. If you ever go to a coaching session and it's more than one, if you ever go to a coaching session and you have multiple sessions and your coach does not set you tasks, then they're not a very good coach, because probably 70% of the change is going to happen through the actions that you set with, alongside, you don't dictate them, with your coachee. So here's a couple of my little rules of thumb about setting tasks. The task has to be something that supports the focus of the session. So for example, fairly recently, within the last couple of weeks, I've been coaching someone around their belief that they can't make enough money. And one of the tasks I set them was to go away and do a personal break even on a spreadsheet and work out exactly what their cost of living is, both for their business, because they're self-employed, and for themselves. And that is something she absolutely has to do before she comes back for her second session. Because if she can't commit to that, she can't do that, there's no point talking about beliefs. There's some tangibles that need to happen first. So that's the first thing. Secondly, there needs to be an evidence procedure. So for example, in this case, she has to produce the spreadsheets. She can't just go, oh, yeah, I've done it. I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to go through it. This could be a journal. This could be actually achieving something, signing up for something, registering for something, reading something. It could be anything, whatever related to the task. The third thing is the task has to be achievable before the next session. So that's kind of where some of the questions here, like what's reasonable to expect. Yeah, don't go setting or agreeing to a task which is just insurmountable in the time frame. If you're going to meet in a week's time and it's actually going to take a month to do, then bite off a smaller piece of it. And finally, my top tip, and this was taught to me probably about 10 years ago, and it's really, really worked for me, and it's worked for the people that I've coached, is you must be willing to impose penalties or forfeits. Now, depending on the nature of your relationship with the coachee, it's going to manifest itself in different ways. But for example, if someone is paying me to be their coach and they do not do their tasks, I cancel the next session. I have to produce their tasks 24 hours before the next session, or I cancel it. Because if they can't be bothered to do the task, or they can't commit to the task and they agreed to at the time, then I'm not going to waste my time seeing them. And it is a bit of tough love. So if depending on your relationship with the person, you're going to have to decide how you do that. But it is tough love, and you have to get people to be accountable. So right now, as your coach, I'm going to help you to make a decision. You can either get the results you want and change your life forever, or you can keep on doing the same things. But do remember this, as Tony Robbins once said, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So by using my methods, you can learn how to coach others to greatness. Now, I'm not sure why you turned up tonight. Maybe it's because you wanted to add some sparkle to your leadership skills. Maybe it's because you wanted to be able to help others more effectively. Or maybe it's because you actually would like to have a coach yourself. I don't know. But now you know how and when to use non-directive coaching. You know how to structure the session, and you know how to set tasks that are actually going to help the coachee along. And this may bring up the question for you: how can I learn to be even more effective at coaching others? Well, you can do this the slow way or the fast way. At the end of the day, you can either try and do it all yourself, and there's plenty of good books out there, including mine, of course, or you can draw upon the expertise of the Engage and Executive Company and fast track what it took me 20 years to distill.
So as you look at that model, I want you to think there around the Engage model. I wonder which one of these areas resonates with you the most. Which one of them is blocking you from moving forward in your career? If there was one that you looked at and you went, God, you know what? If I could just get that one working, everything would fall into place. Or which one of these holds the key to getting more out of your work and personal life? Because I want you to start thinking about whether or not you'd like to have a bit of a free chat. Now, I know some people on the webinar have already had that free chat, so that's all good. But if you haven't, why not go ahead and book a session? Have a little think about whether or not you want to have that free chat, because the purpose of the free chat is very simple. I have a massive belief based on 20 years of professional observations that it is the truly successful people need to be both a knowledge worker and a people person. One without the other is like Lennon without McCartney. Unless you've got both, it's going to be very difficult to win both hearts and minds. So the 15-minute fact find, which is effectively the 15-minute chat, is a way of helping you to crystallize exactly what's holding you back. It will be like a friendly interrogation, and I'll be asking you a whole bunch of questions of how that will give you real clarity around things like, what do you really want to get out of both your personal life and your career? I'll be asking you questions like, what is the current reality around this, which for some of you may be uncomfortable, but we need to do it. We need to kind of get through that. And finally, I'll be asking you, what is getting in the way of you achieving your goals and desires? Because it's not until we've identified these blockers that we can actually do anything about it. So we're right at the very end of the presentation now, but there's just a couple of things. I really would like to hear from anyone, providing you kind of fit this pattern of behaviors. I only really work with people who are willing to go outside their comfort zone. So if you're the sort of person that, doesn't really like much of a stretch, you like to keep doing what you're doing, then it's not worth us having that chat. I only like to work with people who can be open and honest about what's holding you back. So if you're going to put a nice veneer over it and pretend that everything's fine, there's no point us having that chat. I only work with doers, not thinkers. If you kind of go, yeah, I know that, but you don't ever do it, and if you did do it, you wouldn't be feeling the way you felt, then this chat isn't for you. So again, 15-minute chat. This is the last slide of the presentation. I only have 12 places a month because the rest of the time I'm busy running my Engaging Executive program. If you want to get a free copy of my book, Engage, that's only available if you book in a chat today. The chat doesn't have to be today. You just have to click on the link today, book a chat for any time in the future. And once we have that chat, the book is yours. So if you haven't already done so, folks, please book in a chat. It's completely free. It may actually be very helpful to you. It may change your life. It may change your career. Who knows where a free conversation will lead?